Do you have to wear a cardigan to be a healthy masculinity guru? That's one of the questions we're gonna ask ourselves today. This video is not about cardigan, but I had to find something to start the video. In this video, we're going to have a look at gender norms, the politicization of clothing, masculinity, toxic and healthy, all that good stuff. But before we start, maybe it'd be good to define the terms so that we're on the same page, okay? Toxic masculinity. Quite controversial, isn't it? You'd be surprised to learn that the phrase or the concept was first used by anti-feminists, yes. More specifically, the mythopoetic men's movement. The movement became a big deal in the 1980s, 1990s with the release of leader Robert Bly's book titled Iron John, published in 1990. The book remained on the New York Times bestseller list for many, many weeks. It was a huge success. To put it simply, Iron John is the story of a boy maturing into adulthood with the help of a wild man. It was a source of inspiration for the development of the mythopoetic men's movement, which is largely based on this idea of men raising other men, forging their masculinity together, etc. According to them, so the men of the movement, society had turned men into selfish competitors. It had destroyed male camaraderie. And when they say society, they mostly refer to two things: rising individualism because of neoliberalism and feminism. Men were becoming more and more feminized, they say. They were facing a crisis of masculinity. Little parenthesis here. I find it funny to see that this notion of crisis of masculinity has existed for centuries, Jordan Peterson and Ben Shapiro did not invent it. Since ancient times, across the globe, in various cultures, it has been said that men are in crisis. Even if women couldn't vote, even if women couldn't work, even if they were underrepresented in positions of power, which is still very much the case today. So please take that with a grain of salt. It's a bit too easy, too convenient to proclaim that men are in crisis all the time. It prevents us from looking at masculinity or masculinities as objectively as possible, which is exactly what I'm trying to do in this video. End of the parenthesis. So according to them, toxic masculinity referred to the individualist man who wasn't raised by a strong, respectable male figure. In today's media landscape, an example of toxic masculinity would be Andrew Tate. He ticks a lot of boxes: absent father, greedy man, mean towards other men, etc. And I guess the respectable, wise male figure would be someone like Jordan Peterson, whose ideology very much aligns with the mythopoetic men's movement. Peterson seeks to teach young men how to be a good man. In his self-help books, Peterson becomes a mentor to people seeking guidance. In his talks directed at young men, he hopes to encourage them to reconnect with what the mythopoetic men's movement called deep masculinity. To preserve and rekindle deep masculinity, the movement organized seminars and retreats during which groups of men were isolated from the rest of the world, so from women, usually in nature, to mature with each other. Those retreats still exist today, and I don't want to make fun of them, but one of those organizations' programs is called the Man Can Project. It seeks to create new warriors, as you can see on screen. So that's one form of opposition to toxic masculinity, deep masculinity, which is very essentialist, very patriarchal. I don't need to tell you that, since it starts from the basis that men and women have completely different values, essences, and therefore different roles in society. Men are the warriors, women are the carers, and everyone in between has to conform to one category or the other. Another form of opposition that is becoming more and more popular is the concept of healthy masculinity. This is the topic of this video. You did an Instagram story on your Instagram page asking your followers about positive masculinity gurus, some examples.
Number one, Pedro Pascal, who I think a lot of people agree on. Keanu Reeves, of course, everybody loves Keanu Reeves. Ali Esem, who is a friend of mine, he's an Egyptian actor.
Okay.
Justin Baldoni, I don't really know the dude, but a lot of people know.
He's very much like the healthy masculinity guru. He's also like quite strong and like good looking. And
Trevor Noah, Luke Cook. Luke Cook is spectacular. Not 100% sure, but Harry Styles, somebody says that.
That's interesting, yeah.
We have Lil Nas, Prince Harry,
Sorry.
Tom Hardy, he's an interesting one. I think he does embody positive masculinity. I've heard a lot of things that he said about masculinity in general.
It's interesting to see how the perception of what is a respectable man changes with time, and there is no better way to see that than through TV ads. My mom often tells me that now men in TV ads also do the laundry, they also take care of the baby, they also cook. They are all feminists. When Me Too gained momentum, the brand Gillette did an ad campaign looking back at how they themselves used to promote a different type of masculinity, which heavily relied on stricter gender roles, the diminishment of women, and the infamous boys will be boys. And it then reversed the paradigm, showing men who understand the consequences of their actions and want to change. Gillette as a brand was sort of personified. By that I mean that it felt like Gillette was the embodiment of the respectable man whose value system changed from toxic to healthy, thanks to Me Too. In France we have a term for that. We say that these guys are hommes déconstruits, deconstructed men, meaning that they have unlearned their misogynistic biases to become better men towards women and others. The concept of the respectable man was coined by Emmanuel Beaubatie in Le Genre pluriel. In this article, the sociologist looked at how being a male feminist or being pro-equality became the respectable masculinity because it signals modernity. The modern man does the dishes, picks up the kids at school, doesn't repress his emotions, treats the women in his life as equals. At least that's what they tell us. In fact, one thing that is consistent in most of the research on masculinities, is that it is not because one model is hegemonic, meaning dominant, respectable, that it is the reality for all men. Let me explain what I mean by that. Let's take the example of Rocky. Rocky, he's supposed to be what a real man is supposed to be, right? Strong, self-reliant, self-disciplined. But who is like Rocky in real life? Not many people, very few people. Rocky's body, life and achievements are unattainable for most men. But that doesn't matter. What matters is that you continue to believe that Rocky is the alpha male and that in order to be a man, you have to get closer to that ideal and potentially put down other men who are also trying to get to that ideal. When a guy says that another guy is a pussy, well, that's exactly that. It's the exact same thing as when bosses use strike breakers, so average workers to stop a strike. And then while the workers fight against each other, the boss looks from above and remains untouched. The boss, patriarchy, that's the same thing. In a similar way, when brands promote positive masculinity as part of their marketing strategy, they participate in giving rise to a new competing ideal. For those brands, healthy masculinity, positive masculinity, becomes a sort of social currency. It's profitable. As Emmanuel Beaubatie wrote, it grants symbolic rewards. Some men, not all men, perform positive masculinity, and I insist on perform, to make you buy their books, to make you watch their videos, and don't necessarily apply what they preach in their daily lives. That doesn't mean that their message isn't good, that it doesn't have a positive impact on others, but it's always good to remain critical and keep people accountable as well. Talking about accountability, I love to bring up this study conducted by Histoire in France. It's a very well-respected organism, and they compared the division of house chores in the 1980s and in 2011, and women went from taking care of 69% of house chores to 64% in 2011. So things haven't changed much. And sure, 2011 was a while ago, so it probably dropped a little bit, but I assume it hasn't dropped much. And it's important to say that working class women are more likely to take charge of house chores. Timothée Chalamet is often used as an example of healthy/positive masculinity. He's the new Rocky, he's the future of masculinity, the media says. But we have to nuance all of that. We have to ask ourselves, who establishes what is respectable masculinity? Whose interests or tastes does it reflect? In fact, because masculinity is connected to gender, it is tempting to only analyze masculinities through gender, but doing so can be really reductive. Gender politics, gender expression is conditioned by many factors that extend beyond the individual. Men don't necessarily choose to be toxic or healthy, they are socialized in a way that promotes one or the other. For example, I found that scientists have observed significant differences in the way families raise their children depending on their class and cultural capital. Just to make sure we all get it, cultural capital refers to the amount of cultural resources one person detains. Maybe you have read a lot of books, maybe you have a master's degree, a PhD, maybe you know how to play an instrument. All those things will increase your cultural capital. In working class families, therefore families where cultural capital tends to be low, gender differences between boys and girls are accentuated. The toys, the clothes, parents' behavior are very gendered. Whereas in families where the cultural capital is high, so usually liberal families, the hipsters, the bobo, as we say in France, those differences aren't as strong. All those factors have consequences on the way boys and teenagers forge their masculinity. It is not surprising that male feminist allies are mostly educated, liberal and middle class, because they are more likely to have grown up in a household that has an egalitarian ethos. And it is not surprising that Andrew Tate's fans are young, conservative, working class to middle class men, because they are more likely to have grown up in households where gender roles were strict and gender expression more constrained. One more class racial aspect to take into account is that those who are dispossessed, diminished on a daily basis, can turn towards the few people below them to treat them the same way they are treated by the dominant class. In Double Jeopardy, To Be Black and Female, a very important text in the history of intersectionality, Frances M. Bill wrote that to be a black woman is to be a slave of a slave. By that she meant that the black man is oppressed in many ways, but still has power over the black woman he can oppress in return. Now I really want to make it clear that none of those factors make any cases of sexual violence or sexism less problematic. However, it is crucial to understand those factors and take them into account in the way we talk about masculinity, toxic or healthy. I mean, without those factors in mind, it is very tempting to say, and a lot of people do it, that it's always the same people, it's always in the same places that I get harassed, catcalled or whatever, and then therefore these specific people are the problem, when in fact sexism is everywhere. In the public sphere, in the private sphere, among left-wing people, among right-wing people, among working classes, upper classes, it does not manifest itself the same way all the time, but it is there. And I also want to make it clear that these are social trends, so it is possible that you know of one or multiple counterexamples, but the studies that I've used have looked at a variety of people, large amount of people, over long periods of time, so that's what they came up with. To go back to where we were, it is evident that Timothée Chalamet, but also Tom Holland, Harry Styles, and other men like them are the future of masculinity, or maybe, but only for a specific class of people. I mean, we see them everywhere in liberal media because it reflects the taste and interest of people with high cultural capital. The fact that I like those guys, that I love the way they play with gender expression, etc., says a lot about me. So we know that positive masculinity gurus won't put an end to patriarchy, but at the same time, we know that in our present society, role models are crucial in the formation of one's self-identity, so what should be done?
Super ugly to say, but I'm sorry, I'm just going to have to say it. We need male role models that fit the category that men want to see. A person who is indeed fit, who is maybe, rich, smokes cigars. Cigars are not, it's not really, toxic, except, for your body. You could be on, have amazing cars.
Electric cars, only Teslas. You don't want to, you want to save the planet.
Have them like environment friendly. You can go to the gym, but still be healthy masculinity and positive masculinity and not hate on women. And a lot of people who follow Andrew Tate, they follow him for these reasons, right? Not for the misogyny. They need a role model who embodies a lot of the things that they find attractive in men like Andrew Tate, right? But in a healthy way.
That's what someone like Hassan Abi tries to portray in a way. Hassan has a deep voice, he's built, he has an expensive car, a big house. He ticks a lot of alpha male boxes while being left-wing, while being an ally. So because of how he looks, he has the capacity to get the attention of young men who grew up in more traditional households, who don't have a very high cultural capital, and he can then work on changing their perspective on socialism, feminism, trans rights, etc.
That's step one. Step two, a bit more effeminate kind of men, other kinds of men, and then step three, women, and step four, everybody else. It's so disgusting. I am aware that I have to say this. I'm sorry, but we're looking for progress. We actually want progress. We cannot call ourselves progressives if we're not actually looking for progress.
So Shady is an activist. He looks at things very pragmatically, and while I totally agree with everything he has said, I don't like to settle for pragmatism, so I want to go a little bit deeper, to explore that a little bit deeper. I just wanted to say that what I'm going to say now does not invalidate what has been said earlier. It's just to add another layer. We need to stop going in circles and address the roots of the problem, which is that the formation of men's identity is systematically tied to masculinity. We attach moral values like kindness, self-reliance, respectability to a gender expression, masculinity. Why do you have to be a good man and not just a good person? In one of his short videos, Big Joel replied to a viral tweet that said that the reason young men flock to the alt-right is because the left gives brain-dead advice to young men. We need to be more compassionate to them, for our own sake. To which Big Joel replied that it's foolish to believe that the problem with society is that people aren't being shown the right thing, that the right words aren't being said to them, and that if we edited all those words the right way, came out with the right guy, we'd be able to fix everything. It's the same thing as believing that we can solve climate change if only every single individual could change their lifestyle. It won't happen. We can make improvements, and we should encourage people to do those lifestyle changes, but it's not enough. In his video, Big Joel said that his best advice to young men would be to do what they think is good, according to them, according to what we generally deem as good. I like the way he phrased that because he completely removed masculinity from the conversation. He talked about being a good person, not a good man. In a similar way, this person, Griffin, who is non-binary, said the following during a debate on masculinity organized by Vice.
Kind of becomes like irrelevant whether or not we attribute like having like a good ethical compass to being like masculine. A lot of those things are just things that people should be doing because they're like morally right. Like if you're in a family, you should probably support your family. And I really don't think that it has to do with like your manhood.
To which another participant later replied, predictability. We love to put people in boxes, it makes life easier, decision-making easier. But is it just about predictability? Who invented those boxes in the first place and why? In his work on the history of sexuality, philosopher Michel Foucault got interested in that topic. He understood that the imposition of certain sexualities, of certain gender expressions, gender roles by religious institutions haven't always been the norm, isn't the norm everywhere. But he concluded that it made sense to want to regulate sexuality and gender expression in societies that sought to better control their population and eventually expand it, which is exactly what colonial powers hoped to do, and did, at home and abroad. So the promotion of heteronormativity, which includes heterosexuality as well as the gender binary, gender roles, is a great way to make sure that we have a bunch of self-reliant families that can make babies, that can then become soldiers, workers, all ensuring the preservation of a nation. But at what cost? How many lives have been erased, damaged because of the existence of such boxes? The answer is too many. It's ridiculous, to be honest. In the case of masculinity, toxic or positive, we continue to see how unrealistic and sometimes ridiculous those rigid boxes are. In a video he did in response to Sneaker, Noah Samson mentioned something that was quite interesting, namely that Sneaker put all leftist soy boys, as he called them, in one picture as a warning sign, you know. And it's true that when you look at it quickly, yeah, you have some people with long hair, some look a bit chubby, but among them you also have guys who lift on a regular basis, who are very fresh and fit, just like what is expected from a real rocky man. Andrew Tate said that he would rather have sex with a 10 out of 10 Megan Fox-like transgender woman than a female Hulk Hogan. And just generally speaking, I've seen a lot of people commenting on the fact that he often looks like an older gay guy. And actually, Sneaker himself said once that he had watched his girlfriend having sex with another guy, which is fine if everybody was okay with that, but that's not something that is very alpha male, according to this guy's standards. Finally, last example, I want to go back to that Vice video I showed you earlier. Just to give you a bit more context, they invited a few men with different perspectives on masculinity, what it means to be a man. This guy introduced himself. He said that he was a married father who worked in the military, and you know, it'd be easy to assume that given the way he looks, given what he does and where he comes from, he's probably gonna say a lot of problematic things. But wow, this guy had great takes.
The thing that I see is a lot of deconstructing generational trauma. The be a man, boys don't cry, you know, this, that, and the other thing. And I think that's actually one of the reasons why we see it as a crisis, because we're actually trying to redefine what it means to be a man, and none of us have any idea because we're just out here trying to be whoever we are.
That's right.
It was impressive to see where he came from and where he is now, and that's a real source of inspiration. He didn't change much from the outside, but changed so much from within. So you see the urge to attach the physical display or absence of masculinity to a set of moral values does not make sense because there are so many counterexamples, even among those who are strong advocates for this or that type of masculinity. As another participant said,
the box has gotten so small for just being, say, straight, just being a hetero, right? Because if you do anything, women judge you.
What do you mean anything?
If I dance a certain way, or if I wear my hair a certain way, if I dress a certain way, they go, real men don't do that. Real men don't do that.
It is true that many people choose to take the risk to challenge gender norms in public, and it's amazing that they do that, and we should celebrate more, like seriously. Go and follow Elevate Men, and they're impressive. But the majority of people still refuse to step out of the box because it's too scary, because whether it's online or in real life, someone is waiting for them to do that, to call them a pussy, to say they're gay. So to conclude, I'm quite skeptical with this concept of healthy masculinity or positive masculinity, because I think it continues to attribute more values to a gender expression. It becomes yet another box. I understand that it is convenient to use it as a point of reference, as a way to facilitate comparisons or conversations. I use it myself, but I don't see much value in it in the context of the fight against patriarchy. I believe that the existence of a spectrum from toxic to healthy masculinity too often centers on looks. It perpetuates this thing where aesthetics, looks come first, and values come second. I like the way this person looks, I find them cool, and I want to be like them, therefore I want to think like them and do the same thing as them. But that's really fragile, because it means that the belief in a certain value system, in our case gender equality, feminism, mostly depends on the liking of one person. Sure, many men who were drawn to feminist values because they liked Hassan Abi or Timothée Chalamet continue to do the work to strengthen their new value system, but not all men. Many just perform what seems to be cool, respectable at a given time. And if feminism isn't cool anymore, then they'll quickly shift back to another value system, one that can be anti-feminist. So wouldn't it be better if we ditched all the boxes, all the masculinity labels, all the masculinity role models, and just focused on being good human beings?
Us as men, we have to be taught to feel. We have to be taught to feel, because we cannot listen to others, anybody else, if we are taught that confidence is number one. But how are you going to empathize if you're taught not to cry, if you're taught not to feel, and if you're not taught to express, that we're only taught to be angry or to be happy? But yeah, dismantling the patriarchy and dismantling misogyny and gender roles in general is going to teach us how to feel. And you cannot listen to others actually, properly, if you can't feel, if you can't actually lower that confidence and lower that ego that we believe and we are taught is what embodies a man, what makes you actually a man, to make the decisions. Most men make decisions not out of listening to others, not out of empathy. If you look at wars and if you look at every single thing that we have, that we suffer from, it comes from overconfident men, overconfidence. And there is nothing about overconfidence that does not correlate with what we are taught is a man. And the patriarchy and the gender roles and the definition of what we call a man.
That's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, the conversation continues in the comment section. Don't forget to like, to subscribe, if it's not done already. I would like to thank my patrons for their support, and I would like to say a special thank to top tier patrons: Corey G, Tristan, Patricia, Marcelo, Christopher, Ian, Donage, Alex, Ren, Sam, Manuel, Dakota, Jay, Carla, Perry, and Benjamin. Other than that, I'll see you next week, and yeah, salut! Okay, so we're doing a video on positive masculinity, and all you do is just cosplaying Andrew Tate toxic masculinity just because you want to try to get them.
No, I'm getting the things that they like from Andrew Tate.
Look, I'm your friend.